You've checked your phone in a hospital waiting room, hoping for a text that changes everything. You've sat in your car in the driveway, completely out of words, completely out of options. You've prayed the kind of prayer that isn't polite, the kind that begs, the kind that comes from the absolute bottom of your chest. And then, nothing. Just silence. When that happens, the first thing we do is blame ourselves. We think we didn't pray hard enough. We think we didn't use the right words. Or worse, we think God just isn't listening. But here's a strange comfort. You are not the first person to hear silence. Here's where we're headed today. We're going to look at 5 times in the Bible when the sky stayed quiet. 5 stories where God didn't answer the prayer the way they desperately wanted, because in the silence, something else was actually happening. You know that feeling when you get the exact phone call you've been dreading? Let's start with a king who had everything but couldn't fix the one thing that mattered. His name is David, and he is lying on the floor. For 7 days he doesn't eat, he doesn't sleep. His newborn child is critically ill, and David is pleading for the boy's life. He is weeping. If anyone had the right words, it was the man who wrote the Psalms. But on the 7th day, the child dies. Here's the part most people skip. When David hears the news, he doesn't walk away from God. He gets up, washes his face, goes into the house of the Lord, and worships. God's answer wasn't silence. It was a hard, painful no. Sometimes the hardest thing to accept isn't that God isn't speaking. It's that his answer breaks our heart. But David shows us that you can mourn the no without losing the relationship. You can be entirely shattered and still stand in the house of God. You've had that chronic pain, or that lingering anxiety, or that financial stress that wakes you up at 3 a.m. It just won't leave. Fast forward to a man who literally wrote half the New Testament, who felt exactly the same way. Paul had something he called a thorn in the flesh. We don't know exactly what it was. Maybe a physical illness, maybe failing eyesight, maybe a severe struggle with his mental health. 3 times he begged God to take it away. Not just a quick prayer before dinner. 3 long seasons of desperate, face-to-the-floor pleading. And God didn't heal him. Instead, God said, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness." Think about a parent watching their child struggle with a heavy backpack. You don't always carry it for them. Sometimes you walk beside them, so they grow strong enough to carry it themselves. Paul's prayer wasn't ignored. It was redirected. God didn't remove the pain. He provided the endurance. Not an escape, a deeper strength. Have you ever sent a text to someone you love when you were hurting? Watched those 3 little typing dots appear on the screen and then disappear? The waiting is agonizing. Now, let's look at the loudest silence in the entire Bible. Job loses his family, his money, and his health all in one afternoon. And for 37 chapters, Job cries out. He demands an audience. He is angry, and he asks why over and over again. And God stays completely silent. Job waited 37 chapters. But when God finally speaks out of a storm, he doesn't answer Job's questions. He doesn't explain the reasoning behind the tragedy. He simply reveals himself. He shows Job the foundations of the earth, the stars, the ocean depths. The answer to Job's suffering wasn't a logical explanation. It was God's absolute presence. Sometimes we want a roadmap out of the dark. God offers a relationship in the dark instead. Take a second right now. Which one of these first three hits closest to home for you? The hard no, like David, the redirected strength, like Paul, or the agonizing wait for an answer, like Job? Let me know in the comments. Finding out you aren't the only one sitting in silence is half the battle. You've been waiting on a promotion, a test result, a relationship to heal for so long, you feel foolish still hoping. Let's look at a waiting room that lasted 24 years. Abraham and Sarah were promised a child. Not a guess, a direct promise from God. But years pass, then decades. Their bodies get old. The biological clock doesn't just run out, it breaks completely. They prayed, they waited, and they heard nothing but the wind. So they took matters into their own hands, trying to force God's promise to happen on human time. Here's the part most people skip. God wasn't late. He was working on a timeline that required the situation to be completely biologically impossible. We panic when our timeline isn't met. We think a delay is a denial. But God is not bound by your calendar. A delayed answer doesn't mean a forgotten promise. Sometimes the silence is just the time it takes to build a stage for a miracle. Finally, you've asked for an easy way out of a terrible situation. You've begged for the cup to pass. Let's look at the night before the cross. Jesus is in a garden called Gethsemane. He's so stressed, so overwhelmed by what is coming, that he is sweating drops of blood. He asks his Father, "If there is any other way, take this cup from me." If anyone's prayer should be answered with an immediate rescue mission, it's the Son of God. If the heavens should ever tear open with a yes, it's right here. But the sky stays quiet. The soldiers still come with torches. The betrayal still happens. The cross still happens. Why? Because saving Jesus from the cross would have meant losing you. The silence in Gethsemane was the sound of a rescue mission being carried out for us. Jesus ends his agonizing prayer with one sentence, "Yet not my will, but yours be done." Surrender. Not because the situation was good, but because he trusted the Father behind the silence. Let's put it all on the table. We looked at David, who received a painful no and still chose to worship. We looked at Paul, who was given strength instead of the relief he begged for. We looked at Job, who got the presence of God instead of a neat explanation. We looked at Abraham, who had to endure the silence until the answer was impossible. And we looked at Jesus, who surrendered to a harder path for a much greater purpose. So here's what this means for your Monday morning. When you wake up tomorrow and that prayer is still unanswered, when the inbox is still empty, the diagnosis is still the same, and the room is still quiet, do not read the silence as absence. Silence is not abandonment. When you don't hear a yes, it doesn't mean you are broken. It doesn't mean your faith is weak. It means you are standing exactly where David, Paul, Job, Abraham, and even Jesus stood. God is not ignoring you. He might be building endurance in you. He might be preparing an impossible rescue. Or he might just be sitting next to you in the dark, waiting for you to stop asking for answers and start resting in his presence. You are seen. You are loved, even when the sky is quiet. If this found you today, it found you for a reason. Come back next week. We'll open the next page together.